So, Jonathan, good to see you. You are here in Berlin with me.
I am indeed, James. Good to see you too. And where are we exactly, though?
We are in Rancilio's BER station, which is kind of like their flagship store, like coffee playground space in Berlin.
Oh, we're standing in front of Rancilio Silvia Pro, and you've made me stand in front of it. So, it's not that I'm in any way stressed, but what have you bought for us to try?
I wanted to buy some coffee from the island of Hispaniola in the Caribbean. Hispaniola, which is, of course, two countries, Haiti and the Dominican Republic.
Yeah.
And I have here some coffee from the Dominican Republic. So, Jonathan, pull me a nice double of this coffee.
Okay, here we go. So, James, I used to have a Silvia. It's the machine that I first learned to make espresso on, but it has been a good while. Nice bit of pre-infusion. I'm liking the colour so far, James.
Looking good.
Getting a little bit light. I think I'm going to stop it there. Let's go take a seat and try it. I am surprisingly pleased with how it looks.
So, Jonathan, here we have a coffee in front of us. What kind of flavour notes are you getting?
Well, I'm going to have a little slurp. Nice. It's predominantly nutty. It's well balanced. Maybe a hint of tobacco.
Lovely.
So you said this is coffee from the Dominican Republic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I understand, my instructions to you were source us some Haitian coffee. What's happened?
I tell you what, I tried. I really, really tried. I spent an hour one morning trying to find Haitian coffee to be delivered to me within a week. Could not do it. But get this, the Dominican coffee I bought, it was super easy to find and it got delivered within 2 days. But Jonathan, Haiti grows coffee.
Absolutely right. I mean, at one time, Haiti was literally the biggest coffee producing region in the world. And that's the paradox we're going to explore today. And I think it's only fair that we say that this is a dark story.
Mm-hmm.
There is content in it that I found quite distressing. So I think this is the point to say thank you to Rancilio for enabling us to make this free educational content for the entire coffee community that in this particular instance I think is very important for the community to hear.
Let's get into it. So, Jonathan, I'm picturing the Caribbean.
Yeah.
That kind of archipelago of islands that goes down from the tip of Florida down to South America.
Yeah.
And let's zoom into one particular island in that archipelago, Hispaniola, which actually has two countries in it. On the right side, you have the Dominican Republic, and on the left is Haiti.
Yeah.
And let's zoom into the left side of the island, modern day Haiti. It's kind of in the shape of a crab's claw, like it's about to grab something. Imagine we were in a helicopter, taking off from the coast and kind of going up and over the mountains and back down to the waters on the other side of the island. What would we have seen 600 years ago?
Well, James, what you would have seen would have been very much natural scenery, cliffs and rocks, beautiful coasts. You're going up inland, you're going up high, you're seeing forest. And I see some indigenous people, what we call the Taino, and not much else. It's a natural paradise.
Let's then fast forward a couple of 100 years.
Yeah.
Let's go to the early 1700s. This left side of the island, which today is Haiti, was back then called Saint-Domingue. What would I see if we did the same little trip over the island?
You're seeing rather different things, James. Ports, settlements around the ports.
Mm-hmm.
And beyond the port cities themselves, you're seeing the first plantations and the development in particular of sugar plantations.
Mm-hmm.
And you're seeing many more people, and those people are of two colours. You're seeing white people.
Europeans.
Primarily French. And you're seeing many more people of colour.
People from Africa.
Basically working on those plantations. They are enslaved people. They are being shipped in. If we go to the ports, we're actually seeing enslaved people being landed, auctioned and bought on the boats.
What about coffee?
There's not that much coffee at the moment, but as we go up into the interior, the first coffee plantations are just beginning to be cut out.
Okay, so let's fast forward 50, 60, 70 years, and we're now in the 1780s. If we fly over and we were to now zoom into those plantations, those coffee plantations,
we're going to see a lot more coffee plantations. Probably by this time we have well over 1,000 really plantations of one size or another producing coffee. And we know that coffee becomes so successful that those French settlers, the second sons or the third sons, who would go off and try and make their fortune in the colonies because, son number one is going to inherit the land at home, and then what do you do with the rest? You either send them into the church or you send them off somewhere to try and make their fortune in some other way. Saint-Domingue ended up attracting emigres who were first sons because it became so rich.
Wow.
Saint-Domingue became the richest colony of France. It was the place in which you really made your money. So really, coffee has expanded greatly. Saint-Domingue, we're looking down at the port cities. We're seeing far many more people, James. This population has expanded enormously. Can't see hardly any of those indigenous people. Gone. I can see three elements of society. I can see our white settlers, and then we see, and actually notice particularly in the coffee growing areas, we see a population of, as it were, sort of mixed race people owning those coffee plantations. And of course we see overwhelming 9 out of 10 population still enslaved people, either brought from Africa or of descending from those enslaved in Africa.
And I want to zoom in on the enslaved on a coffee plantation. What kind of abuses would they be experiencing?
Actually, a very well documented case, James, that explains a lot about what was happening in about Saint-Domingue society. There's a coffee planter, white coffee planter. His name is Nicolas Lejeune, and he's in dispute with another coffee plantation. And what happens is this dispute is actually very unusually taken to court. There's a new colonial administrator at the time who comes in with some sort of quite liberal ideas and goes to investigate Lejeune. So he goes to Lejeune's coffee plantation, and what he discovers is how ill-treated the workers were, and specifically what he finds is two women shackled, kept inside a cell. Their arms, their legs have clearly been tortured. He has basically tortured them through the application of burning hot materials. And indeed, they later die. He takes this to the local court, which is, of course, dominated by settlers.
The enslavers.
The enslavers. And, of course, what do? They acquit him.
Oh, God. And in terms of the actual physical work on the plantations themselves, if you are one of the enslaved, how grueling is it?
You'd be taken out to the fields. You could be planting, etc. You would have a so-called slave driver overseeing you. That slave driver might well have recourse to a whip in order to encourage you in your work. We talk about the slave drivers. It's worth saying that most of those slave drivers were themselves enslaved or had been enslaved. And there's some interesting discussions amongst the managers of these coffee plantations. Who should you appoint to be your drivers? Now, some people say, of course, you should appoint a good and trustworthy person, etc. There are other people who say, no. What you do is you get the nastiest, the least trustworthy, the worst kind of person. and you make them the slave driver, because you aren't going to trust them and you still have authority over them. But my God, they will terrify the people who need to work. The whole system is based on coercion and fear. The whole society has to be based on fear, because this is a society. We've just been flying over Haiti. I'm counting 9 enslaved workers for every 1 free person.
Okay. And if we fly over 10 years later, so we're now in the early 1790s.
Yeah.
What am I looking at?
Well, you can see a lot from the air now, because you can see smoke. You see pretty much every plantation within 50 miles of the main cities is ablaze.
Wow.
It's destroyed. If you were to go up to the coffee plantations, you'll find most of them destroyed. You're seeing people hiding from each other, people attacking each other. You're seeing grotesque acts of violence.
Okay. Let's fast forward another 10-ish years. We're now in the early 1800s.
Yeah.
What are we looking at?
It's 1804. It's the day that the Haitian Revolution is completed. It's the day that the Haitian general Dessalines,
A man who was formerly enslaved,
declares that Haiti is an independent state. And it's also about to be the day that he then declares that all white people are to be killed. The economy, such as it is, how are these people now going to make a living? How are they going to feed themselves? This is a society that, in one sense, is, the great moment of the first Black Republic, and in another sense is a society in total disarray.
Haiti is this beacon of freedom in an archipelago of enslavement.
Yeah.
And it's also the beginning of much worse to come.
Yes.
And so, Jonathan, in this episode, I want to explore the story of Haiti, how it became free, but why that freedom didn't result in prosperity for Haitians. I want to understand the long-term effects of colonialism.
And the role of coffee in the centre of that, of course.
I'm James Harper, a documentary maker and the creator of the Filter Stories Coffee podcast.
And I'm Jonathan Morris, professional historian and author of Coffee, A Global History.
And this is the second series of A History of Coffee, where we explore how a tiny psychoactive seed changed the world and continues to shape our lives today. So to understand the story of Haiti, we have to understand the French Revolution. And to understand that, we have to understand, well, what was France like before the French Revolution? So tell me about, the first 100 years or so before the French Revolution. We're talking the early 1700s.
This is France under what they call the Ancien regime, the old regime.
Okay.
And France is the biggest, the most powerful state in Europe at this point. The king is an absolute monarch. He rules, he decides the rules. He is the guy who drives the government. There is no sort of democratic check on him.
Right.
The society is a society built around privileges. You have very wealthy people, aristocrats, nobility, but not only are they entitled, they're also, part of their title is to avoid quite a lot of the taxation that falls on the ordinary people.
Okay.
So it's a very, very unequal society. The people at the top hold all the wealth. There's a structure of privilege. And as long as France is overall doing well, that's fine for the king. But the problem is France extends its power further and further, getting involved in a variety of wars. And as a result, it's necessary to start taxing more and more people because the truth is France can't afford these wars.
Interesting. If the nobility have most of the wealth, but you're not taxing the nobility, at some point you just won't get enough tax money.
Exactly so. So look, in 1788, the king's ministers come up with what they think is a very clever plan. What they want to do is bring the voice of the people into the system, particularly, remember, most of these people are peasants. But what they do is they say, oh, we're going to revive this old institution called the Estates General, in which the nobility, the clergy, and what they call the third estates, that's everybody else, are all represented, and they are to meet and debate and approve what the king wants.
So let's use ordinary people, give them a bit more political power, and then they force the wealthiest people in French society to start paying taxes like everybody else.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, curious plan.
So when the Estates General meets, the Estates General has some rather radical ideas about what it wants. And those start with a declaration of the rights of man and the desire that sovereignty, which of course was residing in an absolute monarchy, should now reside in, quote, the people, the nation.
So you're saying a nation does not belong to a king, it belongs to its people.
Correct. And if it belongs to its people, then all its people have rights within it. And indeed, the Estates General very quickly turns itself into a so-called National Assembly that wants to govern. And that produces this declaration, the rights of man and the citizen, which essentially asserts that men are equal.
I mean, to my 21st century ears, this is a pretty fundamental idea that we all have equal rights. But clearly it was revolutionary at the time. And I'm kind of curious, like, where did this idea come from? How did it develop?
It's the debates that are going on in coffee houses that help form the ideas that get reflected into the Declaration of the Rights of Man. It's in coffee houses that all of those great French thinkers have been meeting and debating things.
So we now have this revolutionary idea that all people are equal and every person has rights. So when the common people of France start pushing this idea hard, what happens?
Everyone's in a panic.
Right.
I mean, the aristocrats and the clergy are rapidly seeing their rights being eroded. You know, their privileges are under attack. And the monarchy is beginning to realize that maybe this is going to be a bit more difficult than they thought, and they're going to have to play a difficult game here. And the National Assembly is thinking, whoa, you know, maybe we can take more and more bits of power and start doing things for ourselves. And so there are famous moments when they go to the Bastille, which is the political prison.
Oh, that's right. The storming of the Bastille.
Right. Again, by the way, the mob that went and did that was supposedly incited by somebody coming out of a coffee house and telling them this was what they should do.
Well, there we go.
So we're seeing a kind of popular revolution, and it proceeds in exactly the way that many revolutions do, which is to say chaotically.
Right.
No one is in charge anymore.
Right.
It kind of acquires its own momentum.
So quickly, just summarizing here, we have France is in a political mess where you have the people demanding more and more and more. The king's losing control. The aristocrats and the clergy are running around like headless chickens. And this thing called the rights of man, it's one of the driving principles of a lot of this political action. And of course, France at this point is extremely powerful. It's got colonial territories around the world, including Haiti, then known as Saint-Domingue.
Yeah.
So what happens when this idea of the rights of man travels, across the sea to Haiti?
Let's remind ourselves, first of all, of the different groups of people in Haiti. You've got the settlers, the white population, the French colonial elite, etc.
Right.
Then, of course, you have the vast majority of people on the island, the enslaved people. But remember, you also have a small group of people called the gens de couleur, the free people of colour. And these are people who are usually the outcome of a union between a master and an enslaved woman. And nearly all of those, they are some form of rape, whether it's violent, whether it's coerced, however you look at it.
So what's their status? They're not enslaved.
They are legally free people. They're educated, they have access to elite society, but they are not part of it. They cannot become members of the public authorities, so they are very much second-class citizens. They can own property. What tends to happen is that their fathers may buy them coffee plantations.
And to be clear, these are coffee plantations that use enslaved labor.
Yes. In the 1780s, free people of colour were involved in about 44% of land sales and about 57% of the sales of the enslaved in Saint-Domingue.
So with these distinctions in mind, how did this idea of the rights of man land with these three different groups?
Right. Well, of course, it's creating a lot of problems. So the colonial elite in Haiti, the ruling settler elite, liked some of what had been going on in terms of support for the American Revolution because they liked the idea of having a greater say over their own taxes. The free people of colour think, you know what, we should get the rights of man.
So I can imagine they want to be treated like first-class citizens and not second-class citizens.
Yeah. Now, there's also the small question of the enslaved, which is, of course, a huge question.
It's a lot of people.
A lot of people and a lot of issues, because if you're part of the colonial elite, that bit's terrifying. Because do the slaves have the rights of man? Are the slaves going to be freed? Nobody knows. But, of course, the slaves themselves think a change is coming. And they hear more and more rumours about what is going on in France, and they also agitate for rights.
So let me just recap quickly. If you are an enslaver, you have to keep the enslaved in chains, because if they get any power and they start rising up, I mean, you're outnumbered. 9 out of 10 people were the enslaved on the island. You're toast. And of course, if you are the enslaved, you would have no issues picking up a knife and overturning this horrendous system. And, along comes this idea, the rights of man. Everyone has different takes on what it means. And now the entire social order is up in the air.
Yeah.
The analogy here to me is you have an entire room stuffed full of fireworks and then someone throws in a match, like it's going to happen. It's going to explode in revolution.
The French Revolution is the match that sets the whole thing off.
So tell me about the start of the Haitian Revolution.
Essentially, in 1790, the National Assembly excludes the idea of people of colour benefiting from the Declaration of the Rights of Man.
Oh, wow. The French lay people say the rights of man does not apply to anybody who is not white.
They explicitly exclude them in October 1790, okay? But at the same time, there are other people who, as we've said, notably the free people of colour, who for them, that becomes the radical touch point. Well, if they're not going to get their rights, what are they going to do? There's a man at this time, another coffee planter, and as I said, many of the coffee planters are free people of colour, so this is Vincent Auger, okay? Now, Auger had actually been in Paris and he was agitating for the extension of voting rights to free people of colour, and not necessarily the abolition of slavery, but reform of the condition of the enslaved.
So let me be clear. If I were to be Auger, as in have African and European heritage,
Yeah,
I want voting rights,
yeah,
and I want the conditions of the enslaved to be somewhat better.
yes.
Right.
Now, he gives up on the idea that this is going to happen through normal means, and he goes back to Saint-Domingue, October 1790, and sets up a army, a radicalized armed group, and try and stage an uprising.
Wow.
They don't succeed. He is eventually captured. He makes this error, in effect, and he quickly gives up. He surrenders himself to the authorities, and the thought is that maybe the authorities will treat him leniently because he's surrendered. The authorities do
Oh, God.
quite the reverse.
Oh, God.
Okay, so there is a main square that is used for executions. This square is divided. There's one bit where you execute whites and one bit where you execute blacks.
Wow.
So Auger is executed in the black execution half of the square.
Huh.
He's not executed in a nice way, if such a thing exists. He is executed by being broken on a wheel.
Dare I ask what that entails?
You basically tie somebody to a scaffold which looks like a wheel, and you then go around and break their arms, their shins, their thighs, their pelvis.
Oof.
As with all of these executions, it's like this is done to publicly humiliate.
So the white colonists humiliating Auger, who is, a free person of color, they're in a way drawing a line in the sand and saying, you're not one of us. At the end of the day, you are actually black. So, Jonathan, I know the Haitian Revolution is as complex, if not more complex, than even the French Revolution. Briefly walk me through what happens over the next 10 or so years.
So, 1791, we see the start of outright rebellions within Saint-Domingue. We have elite people of colour, such as not Auger anymore, but those who have been associated with Auger or understood his ideas, most well known being Toussaint Louverture, who raise their militias and side with other groups of enslaved who rebel. And this is an uprising against primarily the white planters and against conditions. It's estimated that about 100,000 people take part in these revolts, that about 4,000 of the French settler whites are killed. Hundreds of coffee plantations are destroyed, about 900.
Wow.
And that, of course, leads to a response. So we get those white owners organizing themselves into militias. They strike back and start killing the slaves, kill about 15,000 of the black rebels.
And this is just the beginning.
Correct. You have, in addition, the invasions of the country by the British and by the Spanish, attempting to take advantage of the disarray of the colony.
My God.
With some success, it should be said, but then trying to re-enslave people.
God.
And there is a struggle of many years. At one point, the French leadership in the Revolution does declare the end of slavery, 1793. But the French Revolution itself gets out of hand. There are lots of elements of resistance to that. It becomes extremely bloody. And in 1799... a new phase of the revolution, however, is entered when a man who had fought with the French army, certain Napoleon, takes over. Now, Napoleon has no truck with the idea of people of colour being of equal status.
Right.
He has no interest in ending slavery. Rather, what he wants to do is reimpose slavery.
What a bloody mess.
It's a total mess.
So how does this end?
This ends because basically the troops that Napoleon sends are defeated by the Haitian rebels. So the army of the enslaved defeats under the Sky Desailly the forces of Napoleon and forces them out. And in 1804, Desailly declares the independence of Haiti.
How does everybody around Haiti react to the formerly enslaved now having their own country?
Every other society is petrified of what happens in Haiti.
So just freeze frame so I can just appreciate this. So
Yeah.
across the archipelago of the Caribbean and in America, indeed, and even South America, perhaps, and Central America,
Yeah.
are literally all these places operating slave plantations.
Yes. literally all across the Caribbean, literally in the southern United States, literally in parts of South America. So, yes.
Wow.
It is, virtually the only non-slave society in the New World, and it is certainly the only black-ruled republic in the New World.
Wow. Momentous.
Momentous, huge, and mind-blowing, actually.
So, Jonathan, here we have Haiti. It's a remarkable place where you have formerly enslaved self-governing their own country. But, like any other country, they need to create an economy, a good livelihood for its people. They've got to create stuff, export stuff. So, how does that work?
The problem really, James, is this, yeah? You've had all these years of devastation.
Right.
The means of production, the coffee estates, the sugar production centres, even infrastructure in the ports is all destroyed.
Right.
And we know, for example, that just with coffee, how long does it take to get coffee back?
Years and years. But even if the coffee plantations get rebuilt, the fact is, Haiti is a country run by the formerly enslaved, surrounded by countries where slavery is rampant. And if the colonial countries, Europeans, were to begin buying Haitian coffee and making Haitians prosperous, it's kind of like saying to all the people in their colonies who are enslaved, if you rebel like Haiti did, you could become prosperous. So I'm assuming that's a major reason Haiti would even struggle to sell any of its coffee.
Exactly. That would be one major reason for not trading. Absolutely right. And simply to do so would be recognizing that you could trade equally between black and white.
Oh, I see.
So, I think you can go to a more basic racial level there.
Aha.
There are other issues too, though. Does Haiti have ships? No, it's got to have somebody who's going to bring their ships in and then protect those ships on their way back to Europe or America, right? You need a navy for that.
Right.
You have the beginning of the growth of coffee in areas like Brazil, and Saint-Domingue has been out of the market for, 20 years?
So it's not like the world is desperate for coffee. There's plenty of coffee being offered already.
Yeah. And then you have one other further question. Let's say that you could find someone to take your coffee. What are you going to do when you do not have free labour?
Oh, interesting. Of course.
So that's a massive problem.
Economically, is it viable anymore?
Exactly. Now, that is a big issue.
Huh.
And basically, they end up introducing conditions, not slavery, but conditions almost akin to slavery.
No way.
Your labour is not really compensated in a wage way. It's more compensated by being offered a living.
Mm.
You effectively maintain a system that maintains these people in extreme poverty.
Wow. Okay. Haiti tries to begin growing coffee again. The odds are stacked against them, but they got to sell it to somebody. So who do they try to sell to?
The big market for Haiti had been France. The other markets in the world tend to work on the same colonial basis.
So the Brits buy their coffee from their own colonies.
Exactly. You each provision from your own territories. There are monopolies that govern who can import coffee from where.
Mm-hmm.
It is not a free market.
So Haiti's only real option here is to sell coffee to France.
And here comes the rub.
Mm.
In the 1820s, Haiti goes into negotiation with France to recompense the French and particularly the former settlers for their losses as a result of the revolution in order to get France to be more accepting of their product.
Oh, they have to do a deal with the devil.
It's a deal with the devil and it has a kicker on it. 1825, there is an agreement by Haiti to pay massive reparations. So originally these are fixed at 150 million francs.
Right. And in today's money, let me just quickly look it up. There are some estimates that is 20 to 30 billion US dollars.
Right.
Why did they say yes? Why did they agree to this?
Because otherwise they're condemned to even worse poverty. Because they can't trade.
I mean, it's the French put a real noose around their necks.
Yeah.
And who exactly is being compensated here?
The biggest single payment goes to a man who had been, as well as involved in plantations, had also been involved in the actual shipping of the enslaved, had shipped about 10,000 enslaved people into Haiti, and had plantations with about 4,000 on. And this guy, or rather his descendants, received an enormous amount of money. So a guy who's responsible for the enslavement of 10,000 people at least is compensated.
Compensated by the very people who suffered to make this guy rich. So what happens next? How does Haiti pay this off?
How do you pay a big sum of money, James, when you don't have that money available?
Well, you take on debt.
Of course, you go and take on debt. Now, you're paying the French, so who probably is quite happy to issue loans to pay back debts to the French government?
A French bank, potentially?
Bingo, exactly. So what you have is this incredible situation where, in effect, the French banks loan money to Haiti to pay off this debt, right? But of course, what happens when you take on loans?
You have an interest rate.
You have an interest rate, and it compounds very nicely.
Yes.
And this means that literally, I mean, the Haitian government is on its knees just getting together the money to service the debts. The first payment, apparently, of this was sent over in boats where the money was sealed inside, bags inside, crates inside, iron hoops packed onto ships.
Wow.
But the end result is that the Haitians have virtually no money in their own coffers. And so how can they then raise the money to keep paying the debt?
Well, they sell coffee.
But how do they raise the money from the coffee that they sell to pay the debt?
I'm not sure I follow.
Well, allow me to put it this way. You let the coffee planters sell the coffee,
Right.
which gets exported,
Right.
but you tax the coffee
Oh, I see.
to get the money into the state.
You tax your own exports.
Exactly. You tax your own exports.
Mm-hmm.
I think that at one time, 2 out of every $3 of coffee tax would be going to service that debt.
Wow.
So nobody is a winner here. The people producing the coffee are actually hardly getting any money for it.
Yeah.
It's being taken away by the state. The state is using it all to pay back to the bankers. And this is not a virtuous cycle. This is a vicious cycle, isn't it? This is a spiral.
You're basically running super hard to just stay still.
Yes, exactly.
For how many years does Haiti pay off this debt? Is it like a couple of hard years and it's over?
You have to be joking.
How long is it?
This debt is being paid well into the 20th century.
Whoa. So what are the long-term effects of this debt?
We get a very politically unstable society. 1843 to 1915, Haiti had 22 governments. 17 of them were actually overthrown in coups or revolutions.
What? That's like every couple of years. It's like every 5 years, new coup.
Yeah, it's indicative of the lack of functionality.
And you just can't help but look at the parallels today. The government is, to all intents and purposes, not functioning. President was murdered.
Yeah.
And there hasn't been a functional president since. It's widely acknowledged that gangs control a lot of Haiti. The country is utterly paralyzed to the point where they're asking for international intervention.
Yeah.
And of course, there are massive economic effects. I mean, what is the GDP per capita of Haiti? Let me quickly look it up. GDP per capita. So, wow, that's low. Wow. $1,800 GDP per capita.
In
2021.
Good God.
Let's look at the other side of the island.
Yeah. Which now would be the Dominican Republic.
$8,500.
Well, there's your comparison.
That's unbelievable.
It's shocking, isn't it?
It's more than 4 times poorer than residents on the other side of the island.
Yeah.
When I think about colonialism and the
Yeah.
effects of colonialism in coffee history, the thing that really shocked me the first time is just slave plantations, how the enslaved were treated, just
Yeah.
utterly horrendous. What the story of Haiti has shown me is that the effects of colonialism go much further than just that. Even when a country isn't ruled by colonizers, Haitians still suffer economically because the world order is controlled, dominated by colonial powers. There is no way Haiti would ever have been allowed to be prosperous. And the third thing that really hits me is the invisible chains, the invisible agreements, like Haiti taking on ridiculous quantities of debt for reasons which are today just unbelievable. This should never have happened. So, I mean, Haiti suffered in 3 major ways. Enslaved Africans went through hell. Racism prevented the country from even trying to be prosperous. And in any case, they couldn't be prosperous because they was dragged down by a huge amount of debt. And the impacts today are just so stark. Haitians are almost 5 times poorer than their neighbors. We do not have the pleasure of tasting Haitian specialty coffee because it's such an underdeveloped coffee sector. The value of coffee exports globally is tens of billions. And yet Haiti's share of that is just $1 million. Microscopic. The effects of colonialism reverberate even today in Haiti. And for how much longer will they reverberate?
The answer to your question is it will continue to reverberate until as long as we in the coffee community can help turn this around. Haiti has suffered from vast underinvestment in its coffee sector, so it's no longer modernized. We couldn't find any specialty coffee from Haiti.
No.
Because there's so little available. But what we as a coffee industry need to be out there working with the small coffee farmers now in Haiti, bringing them up to date with how to produce coffee in ways that will create a specialty coffee that they can then earn revenue from. So I think this is on the coffee industry. It's been a very dark story. Let's turn it round and turn it into a positive outcome. That's really what we need to do. Thanks for listening to this, the second episode in the second series. of the History of Coffee podcast.
And do tell me what's coming up in the next episode.
I think it's time for us to look at where Italy's revered espresso culture actually came from, and why it's a lot more recent than we think.
And if you did listen and want to hear it right now, it's actually out on the A History of Coffee podcast channel, link in the show notes. But if you listen to this on the Filter Stories channel, it'll come out in 2 weeks.
And again, we'll be posting some images relating to the story that we've told today. I will post on my social media, which is Instagram, at Coffee History JM, images around the French Revolution and of the historical figures involved in the Haitian Revolution.
And on my Instagram, at Filter Stories Podcast, I will post some images of what coffee growing in Haiti looks like today.
As always, I'm going to say if you want to get more into your coffee history, please come and have a look at my book, Coffee, A Global History.
We have a link in the show notes. And if you haven't already, please do press subscribe so you can get future episodes. And what would mean a lot to us if you could also write a review on Apple Podcast. It helps the algorithms promote this show to people who like coffee or history, so we can get this story to more ears. And another thing you could consider is if you have an Instagram account, take a screen grab of yourself listening to this episode on your podcast player, post it as a story, tag me and Jonathan, and I'll reshare it on my Instagram. And perhaps, Jonathan, you will too.
I surely will, James. I want to thank Rancilio for enabling us to create this free educational content about the history of coffee, and particularly with this episode, James, of enabling us to do the kind of work that we think is important.
Yes, the Rancilio team have been extremely supportive of us telling this story. And one way you can show your support too is if you are actually in the market for a home espresso machine, grinder, or maybe a coffee machine on your bar, you can check out Rancilio's equipment by following the link in the show notes. Now, A History of Coffee is produced by myself, James Harper, and you, Professor Jonathan Morris. I edit everything together and also write and play the piano music.
So we're looking forward to speaking with you again next time. And perhaps in the interim, you want to go see if you can get yourself a cup of Haitian coffee.
I would really love that.